This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Forge Daily. I am your host, Mackenzie Barwell, coming to you on April 19th, 2024. The CPL season is officially underway. Forge FC matched up against Cavalry for that home opener, and they would come away with the 3 points. It's the first time actually that the club has done that on opening day. It was a fantastic afternoon. The turnout was great. Everybody was smiling, especially after that medal giveaway. And now I'm looking at that 2023 championship banner that Tim Hortons Field is showing off. And the great thing now is that we don't have to wait months or even weeks for the next Forge game. Game number 2 of the 2024 season will take place this Sunday away against York. Although I'm not really sure how accurate it is to say that York Lions Stadium is away anymore, honestly. I think it's safe to say that the Forge fans are not scared to make their presence known there. In today's episode, I am joined by Hall of Fame writer Steve Milton. He recently joined the Hamilton Sports Group as a multi-platform columnist and also hopped on the audio network a couple weeks ago for an introductory episode. He and I will be doing weekly post-match recaps, so I wanted to give him the opportunity today to discuss not only this past weekend, but also his experience reporting for the CPL thus far and what he's observed since the league started. He's got so much to share, knows a lot about this team, so I'm very excited to kick off our post-game partnership with today's episode. All right, Milty, this is the first of many for us. Thank you for joining me.
I'm really looking forward to the season, Mackenzie.
I think it's going to be great. From what I understand, we'll be doing some post-game recaps. I'm excited for that, and I'm excited to kind of bring you to the dark side that is the CPL and not the CFL.
Yeah, I've come to love soccer over the years, and I watched it all my life a little bit, but never really until, I saw the women's team play at the London Olympics, and I was there at every game they played. That really turned me around onto it. And of course, around the same time, we started talking about the potential for a new league in Canada, basically started by the people here in Hamilton, Scott Mitchell, Bob Young, and that group. And we've seen what's happened since then. It took quite a few years, but here we are.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear your perspective. I know we briefly had a conversation a couple weeks ago. Obviously, you've seen either side, and you know how many eyeballs there are on the CFL, but you said you're so excited for the future of this league specifically and how there's already such a loyal, audience and viewership. So can you speak a little bit more to what you've seen over the past 5 years in terms of that progression and potential?
Well, really, for sure. And I'll start with this, that as an outsider, you tend to watch things a different way, right? Because you don't, I didn't play the game, and I didn't grow up watching every single minute of every single game the way that many of us in North America say did with hockey and baseball and those kinds of things. So that's a good thing and it's a bad thing in a way. Not good and bad aren't the right words, but it gives you a different type of perspective. Yeah, it gives you a different type of perspective. And I was shocked in the very first game by two things. The number of people that showed up for the very first CPL game here, we should have known right away that something great was going to happen here, and I think we did. 17,000 people came. Yeah, they didn't have to pay, but lots to giveaway tickets. 17,000 came, and it was a rainy day that didn't clear until just before game time, an hour and a half before game time. So my guess is had it been a nice day for 2 days leading into it, you would have had 25,000 here that time. People came in to watch it and saw something that was tremendous. I mean, they really did see something that was. I was shocked at the skill level offensively. Because I'd always thought of Canada, men's soccer in Canada, that is. Women's been a different story completely, of being more a nation of defenders. I used to say Canada used to hope for an own goal to be the only goal in the game for the other team. But what I saw there was what the players, starting with Kyle Becker when because he joined the team months before it started, was telling me, he said, we have players that are really good offensive players, just nobody knows about them because there hadn't been a career path for them in this country. And there still isn't actually for women a total career path. There's not a building block. There finally is with the CPL and with League One in Ontario in Canada, a direct career path right to the national team to let's say the EPL, going through the CPL and League One and all the age class types of things. But Kyle kept saying to me, you'll be surprised at how good the offensive players are. We just don't see these players because they're somewhere in Europe, playing in the third and fourth division. I've been playing against these guys all my life, he said, and they're really, really good. And that played out in the very first game here. And I've noticed that, and the skill levels increased tremendously since then. And so is it really by the end of I'd say the first 10 games in this league, way back in 2019 when it started, it became clear that the two teams had judged correctly what was needed in this league, and that was Calgary Cavalry, which had been Foothills with Tommy Wilden, the coach, and of course Forge with Bobby Smirniotis and his brother Costa, who had run Sigma. Both of them brought in a significant number of players that had played together before, and they were quite good. Yeah. Obviously, the Smirniotis is with Sigma, and now they've added Hamilton United to that, and Calgary with Foothills, which won the PDL USL Championship in 2018. And those teams, they knew what it was going to take. But since then, teams have had to follow what they've done and try to raise the bar. They're still the class. I mean, if you had to bet money right now, who would you choose? Which two teams will be in the final?
Maybe who we saw in 2023.
Yeah, exactly. And who we saw last weekend here. So some of the teams have really, I mean, you might say that what Atletico did with all those, quote, super signings, even the team that Forge plays this weekend coming up, York, they're sleepers, right? And they always seem to get up. I mean, I think they take that derby. And that's how for non-soccer fans who are watching, that's how derby is pronounced in soccer patois is derby. And derby. Right, so for the derby that comes up this weekend, it probably means a little bit more to York than it does to Forge right now, because Forge has a lot of other irons in the fire, including the rivalry with Cavalry FC, but also with their international play and all of those kinds of other things. But they're the gold standard, so York is aiming at them for sure, and they have they've elevated their game a little bit. Halifax has tried to they 3 or 4 years ago elevated what they did there to try, and it ended up that they made the final that year in the bubble in 2020. So teams have been, and Vancouver, everybody's trying to add something because you have to, because those two teams, particularly Forge, have basically been the ones. Really, they're the Yankees. They're the Yankees and the Red Sox.
That is so crazy to hear you say. There were almost 20,000 people at that home opener in 2019.
Yeah. Now remember, the tickets were free. That was Bob Young's. Yeah, I know, and that was Bob Young's gift to the fans, to the people. Yeah. They ate that. I mean, that's a lot, because there would have been a lot anyways. Well, take a look at this, Mackenzie. Look at the last 3 home games here. What's happened there? Mm-hmm. So the final last year, what did it draw? 13? No, 11. And,
Oh, yeah, something like that. And then, 11, 12.
And then 13 against Chivas in January. Mm-hmm. And 7,600, their biggest crowd of 76, something like that, 7,365 or something like that on Saturday. So that's 32,000 people for the last 3 home games here.
Yeah, these numbers, I think, are a testament to that growth, as you said. I think
they are.
That, initial game and initial turnout is, like you said, an indicator of how much interest there was right out the gate. You talk about Cavalry and Forge really dominating this league and paving the way in some ways. Both clubs having incredibly talented players, very high level of play.
Good fan bases, good ownership, and
let's not forget
the same coaches right through. This is the 6th season. The only 2 teams that have retained the same coach, just for good reason. Success breeds success.
Yes, yeah, and you know what? That's where I was getting at with my next question. No, you keep it. You're taking the words right out of my mouth. How or what else do you think has contributed? And I guess we'll look at Forge specifically here, to that kind of domination over the past 5 years. Obviously, like you said, having Bobby lead the way, Sigma, players that have played together. But what else are some of the things that stand out to you?
Well, obviously, the Smirniotis brothers. Now it's Smirniotis' single brother, and now that Costa Smirniotis has graduated to the, I don't know if graduate is the right word, but is at the CPL and doing for the CPL what he did here, which is, try and get better players. I would think the choice of leaders right off the top on this team, and I'm talking about Kyle Becker, he was and still is, to me, the best player in this league and could have played at a much higher level. But he saw something else. First of all, he knew what Bobby and Costa were trying to build here and wanted to be part of it and was looking at his long-term future. He took this thing long before there were really any. Chris Nanko was the other one, who was also a leader in the first year. He signed right 5 minutes or an hour after Kyle did. But Bobby and Costa knew that this was their captain. They made him a captain before they had made. They even had basically any. They didn't know what the kit colors were going to be. They had no idea who their players were going to be. They said, "This is our captain," and they entrusted in him deservedly the process of making sure the way that they wanted to play was also the way the rest of the team wanted to play. Now, Kyle is very difficult. Not difficult's the wrong word. He's a fabulous teammate, but he is very demanding on his teammates. And they added some other players that I didn't know were going to be like this. And they're the players who've stayed basically all the way through this. And you'd have to include Tristan Borges in that, even though he missed 1 year. But the Dom Samuels and particularly Alex Ashinote Jonsson, when you put him and Kyle together, and you watch a practice, and you've watched lots of them, and I watch most of them, you think that they all hated each other because they're so they're so demanding. If somebody makes a mistake,
it's so true. That is so true,
right?
Milty. Oh.
And then they come off and they're kissing each other. So it's it's exactly the combination that you want. Don't mess around. We got X amount of time on the field, 90 minutes, and every single one of those 90 minutes. And you take your cue from the leadership, and you watch those two guys. You watch Dom. I mean, Dom will flatten his own guys in practice, right? The way he does other guys, and Borges and David Choignard is a similar way. They give everything in the practice, and they don't mess around. And when your top five don't mess around, and when some of them, Choignard comes up with all these brilliant goals. Borges has the season for the ages to start as a 19-year-old and a 20, and then 20. I think he turned 20 during the season in that league. And Becker, he could have been the MVP almost every season in this league. He could have been the player. If it was an MVP type thing rather than just top player, he could have been almost every season in this league. And Tristan Hendry in goal until this year as well. So that those things. Those are really, really key things. The other thing is that everybody in this organization that I've noticed, and I see it more now that I'm sort of a little more on the inside, really cares about the development of soccer, right? So Bobby Smyrniotis, unlike many, many coaches, Tommy Wilden's the same way in Calgary. He cares how this league does, and he cares about the product that's being put in front of the fans. And a lot of coaches will say, I can't coach for the fans because they can't handle that. They can't handle that kind of duality of thinking, splitting their brains in half. Bobby can do that, right? This part of him, okay, I don't care what the fans think, we're going to do it our way and win. The other part is, let's play an entertaining game. We want a game that everybody will come here and watch because that's the kind of game he likes. And he's very much like John Herdman that way, who's now coach at TFC, but was the coach of the national team. Herdman mentioned Smyrniotis to me numerous times as loving the way that he coached the game to play. Plus, he's brilliant. He's tactically brilliant.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Bobby says it all the time in press conferences, whether the fans are for Forge or for the opposing team. He loves fans. He wants to build the game. And even the organization and staff, like you said, we've got an away game at York this weekend. Right. And one of the biggest things we're pushing is for everybody to go because, we want to increase the attendance everywhere.
Right. And it's very important for a number of reasons for the league. But where do all the people and where's all the money in Canada? Southern Ontario, right? I mean, there's some in Alberta for sure, lots, and some in Quebec. The players are great in Quebec and that kind of thing. But the biggest population, where the TV money's all going to come from eventually, is here, and the biggest soccer registrations, all of those kinds of things. It's an untapped resource, and I credit Bob Young with seeing this. Many. I remember him talking to me about soccer. Probably right after he bought the football team, which was in 2003. because he owned a team.
Oh my
He owned a team at the time in the Carolinas, right? And he probably didn't, he may have known what shape the ball is, but he didn't know a ton about the game. He just knew there was something there. And Bob comes out of the computer industry, right? And he's not a young guy like as young as most computer industry people. So he was part of an industry where he recognized early something about that industry, and he saw the same thing with soccer. The growth potential here is enormous, and by here I mean all through southern Ontario, really in Canada. So, and that's one of the things I like about Forge is the growth potential, as well as they're doing. The growth is almost unlimited here. And my guess is that Stelco saw that when they bought into the franchise. They saw that, of course, the big and the oldest franchise, the one that's got the biggest name, that's got the weight and the glory of the history of 150 years is the Tiger Cats. But the untapped potential is on the pitch.
Milty, I'm learning so much of the background I didn't even know existed. You had that conversation with Bob Young the year I was born.
Oh, okay. That's good. I wasn't born that year.
All right.
Right.
Really? Oh my God.
So, really? Yeah.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the home opener this year, aka last weekend, 2-1. Interesting, considering the last time these two teams matched up a couple months ago, and in a similar fashion, especially with Tristan Borges showing up the way that he did, a goal and assist. So just your thoughts on what you saw. I know I was a little bit distracting in the press box, jumping around, trying to be as neutral as possible.
That was funny. Yeah. I come, of course, having come from traditional legacy media, where the thing is, you're not a fan of it, of a team or type of thing, and then they scored the first goal. And can I say what you did?
You can expose me. Nico's gonna listen to it anyways.
She was sitting right beside me and just sort of grabbed me right away and shook me like I was like a doll. It was funny. It was good. And back to the game, I guess it was an echo of everything these two teams have done. I mean, it's spectacular the number of times they've played. I mean, in the first 16 months of the league, which included 10 games in the bubble and the 30 games the first year or something like that, these two teams met 26 times. 12 times. And now in 5 years plus a day, the first game, they've met 27 times. Now it takes Manchester City against Manchester United. Let's take another great rival. It probably takes them to play 26 times against each other in games that matter with something on the line. Probably takes them 10 years. 11, 12 years to play that many times. Same thing with the two teams in Milan. Same thing with Columbus Crew against TFC, right, which is the local MLS rivalry, that kind of thing. So there's that there. And of all those games, and we've quoted this a million times, 27 games, including last weekend, only 2 have been decided by more than 1 goal.
Yeah.
Here it was again. Now, sometimes the pace of the standard of play dictated that maybe it should have been more goals, but that's what it is. That's what rivalries do. Like, you can be outplayed and still win 1-0, and you can outplay the other team and still lose 1-0. And Tommy Wilden makes that point all the time. Of course he would, because he's come out a fewer times on the shorter side there. But they've had some big wins against Forge as well. They've had some important wins, and they did win the first Shield. When they last year made it something, and with it got a berth in Champions League. So there was that. And as you mentioned, it was very reminiscent of last year, because it was also 2-1 in the final, with Borges playing a huge role. Mm-hmm. This time his goal was both goals were seeing eye goals.
Yeah.
Right? The Olympico, you're going to have to go a long way to top that.
Yeah. Because
it decided a championship in overtime, in extra time. And it was, he struck the ball, and I'm just looking out on the field right now, mm-hmm, and I would say that's 15 feet or maybe 5 meters from the crazies who happen to be the Barton Street Battalion. And they right there, and they, like, you cannot believe when you see a ball like that go in.
Yeah.
We're writing about Tristan this week on the site as well. It'll be quite a thing leading into Saturday's game, and so there's that. And then, of course, the other goal was scored by was Benny,
Yeah.
right? Benny Badabanga got that goal. Now they were reversed in order.
That's true.
Because
Right.
Tristan got the first one on a classic give and go.
Oh yeah.
Which in soccer is called a 1-2, right? In every other sport, it's called the give and go. I give you the ball, then I go and I get it back. Classic move in all team sports in which there is passing involved. And those guys executed it brilliantly. Another seeing eye goal, and this is what a striker does, a real striker does. He didn't drive that ball through the goalie. He placed it. He placed it on and got rid of it perfectly. So those are the two guys. Even the Calgary goal. Now, Ali Musa got the goal last year to put Calgary up in overtime, and they thought, hey, we're going to win the championship. And this time it was Ali's perfect. It was a beautiful corner, and it was headed into the net. So brilliantly. So all the goals were brilliant. All 3 goals this game, all 3 goals last time. Each time Calgary took the lead and thought that they had the game. Each time Forge came back with 2 goals. And take a look at it. Both times, there was 6 minutes between the two. Hamilton scored both their goals within 6 minutes.
How?
Yeah, and one might have been 5:59, and the other might have been 6:30 or something. But it was
around there.
But it was like that, like a blueprint.
What?
Like and isn't that amazing? Like it's a great tale.
Yeah, Bobby talked about that too in the press conference. Them coming from behind, and that not being the first time that they've done that. And if you look at their record from last year, a lot of their wins actually came from behind. And he said, we don't want to be in that position often this season because he prefers, obviously, to score first. So you've had plenty of conversations with Bobby. What do you think he's thinking or scheming up to make sure that they're kind of flipping the narrative this season there?
Well, he's already flipped one narrative. Yeah. He, meaning everybody, led by him, winning the first game. You know, when you've had as many wins as they've had and won so many games in the second half of the season, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but spectacular going back the whole 5 years. You tend to forget that they don't often get to a good start. Off to a good start. They usually catch fire fairly quickly. I mean, they don't wait till halfway through, but it's always better to have a bit of a lead, especially now when finishing first means so much. It means a berth automatically in Champions League. You don't have to win. If you don't finish first, you have to win 2 or 3 more games.
Yeah.
Under very pressure-like situations late in the year in October to get to Champions League, and nobody around here makes any bones about it.
Totally. Getting
to international play is huge. Now, winning the cup, the League Cup. Or the Shield is also very, very big because it says something about what you've done all season.
Totally, especially with that playoff format, right? Not only the
what they call the modified page, and you know where that comes out of?
I don't know
if our fans know that.
Please.
Curling.
What?
That's called the page system, and it was invented for curling, where the top 2 teams play off, but they don't get eliminated, right? So the 1 and 2 play off. Number 1 stays alive. 2 doesn't die on the day. Yeah, they wait for the winners, the survivors of the 3 teams that have to play behind. So you're rewarding the regular season, and you're not penalizing somebody for getting a bad draw in the opening round, that kind of thing. So it's funny. People say curling. Well, can't get more Canadian than that.
That's so true.
So
I feel like I need to be taking notes right now, Milty. That's crazy.
I might be making all this up. Do you ever consider that?
I want to go back to what you said earlier about initially Canadian footy being understood as a very defensive-based game. And while we know that that's not necessarily the case.
Men's.
Yes, men's. Yeah. Thank you. That's not necessarily the case now when we look at the CPL and all the talented attacking players. I want to highlight a player that you spoke to this week, Malik Awolabi-Bellew, who was also represented in CPL Team of the Week. What are you seeing from him right now that we haven't seen in the past? And can you give us a little sneak peek into your conversation and what he had to say about how he's feeling a game?
Well, I think he personifies, and he's not the only one on this team, the manner in which this club has been conceived, and it's the only one that does it this way. Calgary has chosen a different kind of route. And credit to them, because they've done very well with the route that they've chosen, which is they've made a lot more changes each year and that kind of thing. Bobby works at 3-year cycles, and part of that is you always have to replenish, right? So that means that you always have people there who are moving through the system. And Malik was one of those guys. And you pay for the mistakes of those players early in the first year, sometimes two. And Malik could be the first guy to tell you that. So he is a guy who probably, especially given the spot that he plays, because you play back in there and people notice your mistakes there. You make a mistake close to the other team's net,
it's not necessarily
the ball still has to go through another 9 people
yeah.
to get into the net. So only the goaltenders and basically the center backs, because the ball eventually comes through the center. Even the wing backs or the flanking backs they don't get seen as much by fans.
They're not so obvious, maybe. I see what you're saying.
That's right. And my son played goalie in hockey for years, and it was just devastating to watch that. And I can't even imagine being the parent of a
yeah.
or the partner of a goaltender in soccer,
no.
and a center back. I mean, then there are 2 center backs, left and right, and so Malik. That's one thing. He personifies that. So Bobby does a 3-year thing where you have the core guys that you hopefully are going to be here for long periods of time that add stability to the franchise. There's what would be the institutional knowledge and thinking, and they're the ones and they pass it on.
Yeah, that
and
culture,
then
right?
you have
identity.
The culture is probably the best word for it, Mac, and that's exactly what happens. And then you don't get that at first. And it takes a while, and sometimes, because quite often you've been the best player on your team, you haven't had to do some of the things that they're asking you to do as pros. So you learn to live as a pro, and it's very difficult to learn how to be a pro. Like, you get to the 20th game of the season and you're just exhausted, and you're working hard every day. You watch practice this year; these guys kill themselves in practice. I don't know, and some positions on the field, even in practice, you're going 10K, in drills and because of your position and those kinds of things. So you learn all of that, and then hopefully by the 3rd year, you're one of the core ones. You're one of the ones that now is spreading those same values to the next group of young players, and Forge has them again. And then of course then you bring in a bunch of players. Not a bunch, but 4 or 5. This is a small turnover this year, 5. But the players they brought in are pretty dynamic, those 5, and maybe we haven't seen all of the signings that they will do yet. So, and then we've seen that with Malik. He knows this is his year that he has to. It doesn't always work. There have been players here that have been on the same 3-year cycle,
and they haven't.
It hasn't worked, right? Or they've got too good and they had to leave, right? Because they went to a higher league and Forge could sell them, or they, or would not stand in their way. That's another thing about Forge. I mean, even maybe if sometimes they can't sell players, and your viewers should understand that part of soccer at all levels, including the very top levels, and let's say the EPL or Serie A or the Spanish league, part of the financing of a league is developing and then transferring and selling players, because you get that money, right? And that's part of and of course pulled off the greatest coup of all time in this league, and it's going to be a long time before we see something like what happened with Tristan Borges in the first year. Out of nowhere, gambled on himself, came home from Europe, played for nothing in League One because he knew the CPL was coming, and then after 1 year, they sell him for, I think the transfer market had him at £200,000, so that's over $300,000 and more, and then they even got him back on loan the next year with the other team paying his salary.
Yeah.
So it's, so that was a tremendous, they expected to be able to sell some young players eventually, but not for that kind of money.
Not that
and
early
not in the
on.
first year.
Yeah.
You're right. I would say they were conservatively 3 years ahead of themselves, and that more realistically 5 years ahead of themselves for that kind of. It was major.
Right.
It was major.
Right.
And it was one of the one of the many big things that happened in and around that first year. One of which there was that, and a couple of other sales. And since then we've had 2 or 3 players many more players be sold actually, and for various amounts of money. But then there was also the TV deal, which nobody expected they'd get that kind of money, and there was also Atletico Madrid
Right.
buying into the league, and we're seeing the effect of that this Saturday with York and their ownership.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's interesting when we look at Borges as well, and when certain players are put into this position to really highlight themselves, you can kind of see the parallels with Malika, as you were saying.
Yeah, well, you can, and I mean, he makes no secret of it. He's you know London born, right, and he lived in the other London, and
He's done both.
he's done both Londons, right, and he may become eligible eventually to play for Canada, and he might start to think about that
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that's happening with international soccer in this country men's is that our rear guard is now a little thinner than it used to be. We're having, they're aging. Some of them are aging out. After this World Cup, there's going to be some aging out. There's a pretty good opportunity for big, tall, aggressive, and he's all of very aggressive.
I feel like you checked all the boxes, and Bobby specifically said that. He said some players are like made to defend. Do you remember that after the game against?
Yeah, and you're looking at people like Dom, people who are pure defenders. Malcolm Duncan's probably the same way. That the glory is definitely in the goals, and you need goal scorers. I mean, that's what puts people in the stands. That's what the game is about. Even in a 2-1 game, you need shooters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the typical score here: 2-1, 1-0, those kinds of things. But that doesn't mean there aren't great scoring chances, and that this game was 2-1, and Tristan had 1 goal and 1 pure assist, and a very pure assist. And if he could have scored a couple of others too.
Yeah, there were
and Cavalry too. They had a chances, and even York on the weekend, they could have been up 3-0 on Ottawa, who's the team everybody's talking about.
You're right. That's such a good point. I wanted to go back to what you said about York kind of being a sleeper at times, because we know that the rivalry matchup between this 905 derby between York and Forge is not competitive, I guess. So
no.
Looking at this weekend, even though York went down ultimately 2-1 to Ottawa, what do you think they're going to bring this weekend? What are you expecting to see here?
Well, one thing I'm expecting to see, and Forge fans know who I'm talking about here, is Mobabuli. People forget he was a brilliant player here. It took him a while to find his feet, but boy, once he got going, particularly when they played internationally, he's one of those guys you would pay to watch specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays in the 10 hole, so he's going to have the ball all the time. So they'll bring that. They've got. I'll go back to when I mentioned Atletico Madrid buying Ottawa, and they saw the value in that, and because of that wakens interest among a bunch of other high-level teams that have always been sniffing around the CPL, kicking tires, and it got interrupted a little bit because of the pandemic, and it's getting back on its feet now. But an example of that now is in I call them Toronto, but it's York, and the three brothers named the Pasquales have bought the team. They bought them in late last year. A lot of people here would have missed that, I think, because I think it happened after the season, or it happened in the time that Forge. Yeah, it was right after the season. So a lot of people didn't see it. There isn't a lot of soccer written on mainstream media, right? I mean, a lot of newspapers, a lot of radio stations, a lot of TV stations don't cover it. So people would have missed that these guys have a deep history in Mexican football. Their uncles and fathers and grandfathers have been, held positions like head of the Mexican Federation, head of Liga X, owned two different teams, that kind of thing. This current group has relatives that owned the team that Pera played for, Daniel Pera. One of the teams that he played for is owned by one of their uncles. So there's a real history there. And they have 3 players that they brought in from Mexico. I think Portello, Martinez, and Leon. Yeah. And here's something. Pera was the roommate.
You're joking.
Of Portello.
No.
I kid you not, with the U23s, yeah.
What?
We're going to write about that. Yeah, we're going to write about that before the Canadian Championships. We'll talk a lot about that.
Okay, so that'll
isn't that nuts? Yeah, well, the world's getting smaller, and here's the thing: there's things are changing in Mexico, temporarily, perhaps permanently, because they're the first major league in the world. First of all, they're one of the most entertaining leagues in the world. Bobby puts them in the top 3 or 4 in the world. He said they play the kind of game I like to watch, meaning Bobby likes to watch. Top 3 for entertainment value in the world.
Wow.
Because of the kind of way they play, that very offensive. But they're also very quick on the defense, as you saw that with Pata in the second half. He had a little trouble adjusting, particularly to marking Ali Musi. I mean, that's the best forward he's going to see in this league this year.
Yeah.
But once he got used to that, you saw in the second half what he can do.
Oh, man. He was playing with flying colors. Yeah, it took him. You're right.
Yeah.
You could see that.
Yeah,
but 100%.
Yeah, you could see that. You could see that. So you got a lot of hope on that back line there with Alex and them. And who else is hurt? There's somebody hurt right now too. That when he comes back,
yeah,
Garb, yeah. So they got a pretty decent back line there, and but what the Mexicans do is close on at least the league does is close on the ball very quickly, both offense, and they don't give you any room to play. We saw that with Chivas. That was the biggest adjustment problem that Hamilton had when they played them, and I thought they played very well against Chivas. They got a goal in each game.
Oh yeah.
Very, very few people do that, and
well, Milty, so many of the players have even referred to it as one of, if not the best games they played all season last year. To me, so
that's right. That's right, and the average fan wouldn't recognize it because they lost 3-1. But right. But they were great. Yeah. I mean, given everything, and back to my point about Mexico. There's relegation in all soccer, right? I mean, we have it in League One now, which is really important. I don't think we'll ever see it in the CPL because it's not a North American type of thing. You invest a lot of money in a team. You don't want that, to go down a league if you've invested all that money. That's just the way the North American sports is. So I don't think we'll see that as much. But the Mexicans have taken away relegation. So because it was too hard on the teams that are always, and you see this in the EPL now, the economics for those, say, bottom 5 teams in the top league and the top 5 teams in the other, where you're always switching around, moving back and forth on relegation. The economics there are crazy. You have to load up and spend too much money on it. So what they've done is suspend, and it may be permanent, but it's a 3-year trial right now. There is no relegation right now between the top league and the second league in Mexico. That changes a lot of things because at some point, those players have to go somewhere. You go maybe somewhere else to play, and in turn, you have to bring in players to that may be a little cheaper, right? So they're looking around, and how many Mexicans are in this league now? There's a whole bunch more, way more than there were at the start. There were very few, and now there's a lot more, and I think you're going to see more of that, and part of it has to do with that there's no relegation there now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We are going to have so much to talk about in the next 7 months.
Well, soccer gives us that, right?
Wow. I don't even want to cut you off now, but I feel like I got to save some for the weeks to come. I've already learned so much. Thank you so much.
Well, you got to save me from myself, too. You got to cut me off at times.
Stop. No, genuinely, thank you so much for sharing your absolute wealth of knowledge, Milty. I'm so happy that you're here. Well, I know you were already here all the time, but now you're really in it with Forge, and I can't wait. So thank you, and I'm sorry we got to end it here, but we've got weeks worth of podcasting to do.
We do. All right, and I'll see you on Sunday at York.
All right, that's all I have for today's episode. Be sure to tune in to One Soccer on Sunday at 4 to watch your Forge FC take on York United, or you can make that 45-minute trip down the 403 to York Lions Stadium. I'll leave that decision up to you all. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back to check in on the audio network next week.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.